Hello class, it's Miss Chambers, and today we are going to read Lemony Snicket's The Composer is Dead. Ooh. The Composer is Dead by Lemony Snicket, with music composed by Nathaniel Stuckey and illustrations by Carson Ellis. We'll get to hear the music a little later. The composer is dead. Composer is a word which here means a person who sits in a room muttering and humming and figuring out what notes the orchestra is going to play. This is called composing. But last night the composer was not muttering. He was not humming. He was not moving or even breathing. This is called decomposing. The composer's death was very suspicious, and so the inspector was called to find the murderer, or murderers, and haul them off to jail. "I will begin by interviewing all the usual suspects," the inspector said. Like all people in his line of work, the composer had many enemies lurking in the orchestra. They can lurk all they like, but I will find them wherever they are lurking. I will find them if they are lurking in the strings. I will find them if they are lurking in the brass. I will find them if they are lurking in the woodwinds. I will find them if they are lurking in the percussion section. I will find them wherever they are lurking. I will find them. So, you see here the orchestra, you see all the sections that he's mentioned, the strings, the brass, the woodwinds, and the percussion. Again, we'll talk about that a little bit more later. The inspector was a very handsome and intelligent person, not unlike myself. "I swear on my own intelligence and good looks," the inspector said, "I will solve this terrible crime against humanity and/or classical music." And with an intelligent, if somewhat flamboyant gesture, he reached into his pocket and took out the notebook he used for all official business. "First I will interrogate the strings," he cried. "Strings? Where were you on the night in question?" The violins answered first, of course. The violin section is divided into first violins, who have trickier parts, and second violins, who are more fun at parties. "We were performing a waltz," said the violins. "We played graceful melodies so that the ladies and gentlemen could spin around and around until they felt dizzy and somewhat nauseous. They kept us busy all night." "Aha!" the inspector cried, making a note in his notebook. "Perhaps you murdered the composer for making you play so much." "Don't be ridiculous," the violins said. "Violins are the stars of any orchestra. If we killed the composer, we would have to find work at square dances or in romantic restaurants." "That's true," the inspector admitted. "But what about you, cellos and basses?" So this is the dinner party that the violins were playing for. The cellos and basses sighed. The cellos and basses are often weary from dragging their large bodies around. The basses in particular are so enormous that they can't even fit into taxicabs without sticking their curly heads out of the window. "We were providing accompaniment," they said. "You can't waltz around without a reliable 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's boring, but it's steady work." "Aha!" the inspector cried. "Perhaps you murdered the composer for giving you such boring things to play." "On the contrary," the cellos and basses said, "we don't feel the need to show off like certain stringed instruments we could mention." "Well, I guess that takes care of the strings," the inspector said. "Oh, the violas. I forgot all about you." So there's the cellos and basses. "Everyone forgets about us," said the violas bitterly. "We play the notes and the chords that nobody cares about. We play crucial counter melodies that nobody hears. We often have to stay up late after performances and stack up all of the chairs. We spent last night feeling sorry for ourselves, as usual. But we did take notice that the concertmaster was acting strange. She was talking and laughing with the composer and carrying a strange black case." The concertmaster is the best violin player in the entire orchestra and is often accused of treachery. "I was talking to the composer about my cadenza," she said, using a word which here means a fancy solo part. I'd never murder someone who was giving me such an excellent opportunity to show off. You all have very good alibis, the inspector said, taking notes in his notebook, but the composer is still dead. Perhaps the murderer is lurking in the woodwinds. Where were you last night, woodwinds? Speak up. Speak up. We were doing bird imitations, said the flutes, the shiniest and highest pitched of all the woodwinds. It seems that's all we ever do. Whenever the orchestra needs a bird, there we are. Aha, the inspector cried. Perhaps you murdered the composer for making you act like birds. Don't make us laugh, said the flutes. We were much too wimpy and high-pitched for murder. Ask the reed instruments. They're much sneakier than us. Sneaky, said the clarinets. We're not sneaky. By the way, Inspector, that's a very handsome jacket you're wearing. Oh, thank you, said the inspector. Such shiny buttons, said the bassoons. You think so? The inspector said, blushing slightly. And the color is very flattering, said the oboes. Really? The inspector said, twirling around. That's very kind of you to say so. Why are you giggling, flutes? Ignore them, said the first oboe, leaning in close. If I were you, I'd question the brass instruments instead. They're a violent lot. The brass? The inspector said, writing in his notebook. You really think so? You can trust me, the oboe said. Everyone trusts me. After all, I tune the entire orchestra by playing an A. Well, you can't argue with that, the inspector said. Brass, what do you have to say for yourselves? So there's the flutes playing the birds, and there is the bassoons and the oboes and clarinets and such. Last night was incredibly important for us, proclaimed the trumpets in a boisterous manner, a phrase which here means loudly and with a certain arrogant rudeness. We announced the arrival of kings and presidents. We let soldiers into battle and held a parade when they got home. Our ears are still ringing from the ruckus. Aha, the inspector said, making a note in his notebook. Perhaps you murdered the composer for making you play so loud. We love being loud, the trumpets replied. Brass instruments are brassy by nature. Besides, loud is patriotic, and we suspect the murder was committed by a foreigner. A foreigner? The inspector replied. What say you, French horns? You have a strange accent. The French horns did not understand the question and began murmuring a story about the old country. There's the trumpets and the horns. Leave the French horns alone, the trombone said. They were in such a state that we took them out to the club to cheer them up. We ordered a few bottles of expensive wine and then took the stage, swinging and dancing until dawn. Swinging and dancing. We were there too, said the percussion instruments, barging in as only percussion instruments can do. We drummed, we percussed, we employed xylophoniness and symbolism. We heard the beat the herd. We struck up and got down. We conquered the concert, battered the band, agitated the audience, rattled the roof, and got the phone numbers of several very attractive young sailors. But when we were beat, far too exhausted to commit murder. And what about you, Tuba? The inspector said. Were you involved in these distasteful shenanigans? No, the tuba said. I'm a confirmed bachelor. I was home at night playing cards with my landlady, the harp, taking sips of warm milk from a little blue cup. The inspector flipped through the pages of his notebook and scratched his handsome head with the well-manicured hand. I'm utterly baffled, he said. I've questioned all of the instruments in the orchestra, and none of them seems to be the murderer. There's the tuba and the harp. The violins waltzed, the cellos and basses provided accompaniment. The violas mourned their fate while the concertmaster showed off. The flutes did bird imitations repeatedly, and the reed instruments had good taste to admire my jacket. The trumpets held a parade in honor of our great nation, while the French horns waxed nostalgic about something or another. The trombones had too much to drink, the percussion beat the band, and the tuba stayed home playing cards with his landlady the harp and taking sips of warm milk from a little blue cup. But the composer is still dead. A strange noise caught the inspector's ear. "Of course," the inspector said. "The conductor. You've been murdering composers for years. In fact, whenever there's a conductor, you're sure to find a dead composer." There's the conductor, leading the band. Beethoven, dead. Bach, dead. Brahms, dead. Mozart, dead. Haydn, dead. Schubert, dead. Mahler, dead. Chopin, romantic, but dead. Tchaikovsky, dramatic, dead. Stravinsky, ecstatic, dead. Schoenberg, incomprehensible, but dead. Berlioz, dead. Purcell, dead. Prokofiev, dead. Debussy, dead. Vivaldi, Wagner, Sibelius, Ives, Handel, Britten, Mendelssohn, Scriabin, Liszt, Copland, Cage, Dvorak, Shostakovich, Ligeti, Lutoslawski, Corelli, Bellini, Puccini, Rossini, Scarlatti, Busini, Botterini, Verdi, J.C. Bach, W.F. Bach, C.P.E. Bach, Offenbach. Dead composers, these are the composers that some of the composers that they're talking about. Dead composers litter the musical world, and it's all because of one man and one little stick. Arrest him at once. Not so fast, said the orchestra in unison. The conductor didn't work alone. All of us have butchered a composer at one time or another, but that's also what keeps composers alive. Without strings and woodwinds and brass and percussion, there would be no composing at all, except for various kinds of non-orchestral music. If you want to hear the work of the world's greatest composers, you are going to have to allow for a little murder here and there. But that's injustice, said the inspector. Those who want justice, said the orchestra, can go to the police. But those who want something a little more interesting should go to the orchestra. The end. Hope you guys enjoyed that, and we will talk about it and listen to the story because, of course, like I said, there is a sound portion of it, and we're going to listen to it soon. So, see you then.